I don't have it. Oh, look at that.
Good evening and welcome to the October 3rd, 2024 City Council Special Meeting. I am Mayor Ross, and tonight's special meeting is brought live to you live using the City Conferencing Technology live. Thanks for part of the City YouTube channel. You're welcome and thank you for joining. City Clerk Dean, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Benson.
Here.
Member Watton.
Here.
Councilmember Holloway. Councilmember Washington. Councilmember Cotton. Here. Councilmember Christensen. Here. Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
I'm here. And Mayor Pro Tem Holloway is on his way. Do you want to go ahead and excuse Councilmember Washington?
No.
He's right there.
He's walking in.
Okay. Then all will be accounted for shortly.
Sorry, did you say?
Who's there?
Oh, sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway is on his way.
Yeah.
Beginning with our first item, to approve the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? So moved. Second. Moved by Councilman Cotton, second by Councilman Christensen. Is there any discussion? Nothing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion passes and the special meeting agenda is approved. We do have a public hearing this evening for AB 24-101, 2025-2026 biennial budget. Do you have anyone sign up on the sign up sheet? No. I will open the public hearing. And this proceeding, we invite the community to provide comments regarding this proposal of the biennial budget. Another person preparing in person, we had the opportunity to speak. However, we did receive an online comment, and there was a copy of that. And no other online public comments will be accepted now since it's past the deadline of 3 p.m. today. So, looking around, I'm not seeing anyone from the public that is here. Okay. We have closing comments for public hearing. And we move on to the agenda bill or the 24-101 2025-2026 planning budget. This is the second reading of the ordinance 1296. And I have one of the Stephanie members to please read the introduction of the motion.
The purpose of this agenda bill is to adopt the 2025-2026 biennial budget. Move to approve ordinance 1296, adopting the 2025-2026 biennial budget.
Second. Been moved by Councilor Johnson, second by Councilor Christensen to approve the 2025-2026 biennial budget. And I would ask for the comments. If you ask anyone that is going to be here prior for the comment. We will move on to continue our deliberation. We will welcome our finance director, Lee, and our budget manager, Janet Walker, to provide an update and answer the council's questions.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for joining us this evening to continue budget deliberations. I have a brief presentation to share with you. And I want to give an executive summary of the budget, some budget highlights, council directed changes that have been made since our last meeting, and then address as a bookend our balanced budget requirements that we started with the first time we presented about the budget. And then finally, we'll have our 10-year financial forecast review. So in summary, the proposed biennial budget totals $174.4 million, including $43.8 million for the general fund and $69.8 million in capital investments. It's important to remember that those numbers are a snapshot in time. We think of the budget document as a living document, meaning that it's open to amendments. Some of the big things that are coming up in the future of this budget document include the utility rate study. We will be addressing the cost of service analysis in October. On the 22nd, we will have our FCS consultant here to discuss that cost of service and how the rates will balance on different participants and users of the system. And then additionally, we have the North Bend Police Services contract. And I think that you all know that North Bend has expressed that they are really happy with the levels of service that the city provides, and they are concerned about the levels, the cost. So those items are to be determined, but that doesn't really negate what we're doing today, creating a document that represents what we see today, our best guess of what our next biennium can be. Some of the highlights within our budget include a 5% vacancy rate within the general fund, and that allows us to have 3 additional firefighters, which is reduces strain on our firefighters and also provides additional levels of service within the fire department, as the chief has explained. It also includes community center pool funding, which has been modeled in the capital improvement plan. It replaces aging infrastructure and equipment, including 21 vehicles, 14 pieces of equipment, irrigation components, and 14 ongoing capital programs. It adds wastewater backup pumps and 3 new utility pickup trucks. The wastewater backup pumps help support our system, prevent catastrophic failure. Essentially, if a pump fails, we are covered. We can continue. And as you all know, if you don't have sewer, you don't have much of a city. So it's very important to balance that. And then also the utilities pickup trucks allow our operators to achieve the maximum possible efficiency. They can all be at different locations across the city as needed. It also focuses on long-term positioning with the strategic plan and fiscal sustainability with the comprehensive fee study that hasn't been looked at in many years. And then finally, it reflects council's priorities, which are evident throughout the document. To continue, some of the highlights, you'll see some decreases in the administrative department. We are letting go of 2 limited term positions in administration. We're adding those 3 firefighters that we mentioned. In information technology, we're shifting a GIS analyst into public works to better match where they're spending their time. And then we're also adding a wastewater operator and an administrative specialist in utilities, which will be a huge help to them as they have additional responsibilities with Munis coming, and we decentralize some of our financial processing. And then finally, the police department within the North Bend Fund is adding 1 additional administrative specialist to support the records and evidence processing. We've also made a couple of council-directed changes since we met on Monday. The first is the solid waste administration fee. We have adjusted that down from 10.7%, which was originally in the contract, down to 8.01%. And the change that you will see in the financial forecast in the budget is a decrease in revenues in the general fund of $156,000. And that is over the 2 years, over the biennium. The second change that we've made is to the ordinance itself. Ordinance number 1296 now includes an additional, section 3 is the section that addressed that the mayor can make changes within a certain fund, that transfers can be made at the direction of the mayor. And we have added to that the sentence, provided, however, that transfers between individual appropriations within the general fund, fund number 001, may be made only within the functional classifications within the general fund identified in the summary in section 2 above. And then my next slide has part of section 2. You can see that those changes or those functional classifications include the administrative departments, fire and emergency, police, parks and streets, community development, and then also our non-departmental. So those numbers that you see up there, those will be beholden to council's oversight, and the city, the mayor cannot make changes between those without approval from you. And then, as I said, you have seen this slide. This is something of a bookend for me. We have so many goals with our budget. Financially and public safety and roads and streets and parks and on and on. There's so many important things we're doing, community center. But if we're not also achieving a balanced budget, then we're not doing the city any favors. So that is a huge goal of ours in the finance department. Section 5.4 of your financial management policy addresses that. One sentence says, ongoing revenue should equal or exceed ongoing expenditures in both the proposed and adopted budgets. If a structural imbalance occurs, then a plan should be developed and implemented to bring the budget back into structural balance. And this graphic that you see so many times The structural balance involves levels of service. Are we achieving the levels of service that the community needs to be able to happily live in this community? Are we levying the right amount of taxes so that we have revenue sufficient to meet all of these goals? And then also, is our economic development, is it expanding so that we can lessen the burden that's falling on taxpayers and achieve just the right mix of all of these three so that it's a wonderful community to live in? And I think that you have achieved that in the past. We're continuing to achieve that right now. And one of the great things that you've all done, is to help us adjust our revenues. You know that we're limited in property taxes by 1%. This year, in the past year, you've passed the TBD sales tax, the 0.1 TBD sales tax. And then also you've given the voters the chance to weigh in on their taxes on the public safety sales tax. And they approved it, I think, with 66%. So those two changes also help us to be a little bit less reliant on the property taxes, more structurally balanced, more resilient to what changes come in the future. And as a visual on that, this is the current 10-year financial forecast. You can see that little bubble that it's right after 2029, that our lines cross, that revenues and expenditures are approximately equal, which means we've pushed it off by a little bit more than 2 years, I think, as to where we saw it last. And it's a great result for the city, as in having a balanced budget that also achieves service levels that are desired in the city. And this is our budget. This is the budget that you've created in conjunction with city staff, and we appreciate all of your work into it. With that, actually, there's one more item. A question did come in about mill site revenues, permit revenues. That question was answered over emails, but we can address that too if you would like us to. But the best place to see those is within the 10-year financial forecast. You can see that revenue jumping up by a few $100,000 and then going back down in the next year from 26 to 27. With that, I'm going to turn the time over you for deliberations and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Anyone have any questions? Mr. Lawton?
I was actually the one that brought up the mill site, and Drew did a director did an exceptional job responding. And I guess the question is, the financial markets haven't quite come back to the point of helping with the development to get underway. And if there is a delay of a year or two to what we had anticipated, how much of an impact would it make on our budget? And you did answer it in the email, but just for public disclosure as well, so that anybody listening in can hear a little bit more of the thought process and make sure that we're not overestimating revenues.
Yeah, so we estimated that revenue at $300,000. Basically, what's important to note is that is permit fee revenue. We didn't include any sort of revenue for sales tax revenue that may result from the development, property tax revenue that may result from that. So you do see a bit of a bump for 2025, kind of a slight increase, and then for 2026 overall. Obviously, with your comments on the market and where it is right now, we're hoping for some additional rate cut action to come potentially later this year and maybe early next year. Whether that's sufficient for the developer to start is really a question probably for them overall. But we are certainly mindful of that, and we'll certainly take action if we do see that it's not actually coming in.
I would really appreciate it if you could reread the section on Fund 001, the adjustment that we made.
Section 3.
Was it
Section 3? Section 3.
Is that Section 3? And then I also had a question about 5.4, but that can wait.
All right, so Section 3 states transfers within funds authorized pursuant to RCW 35A.34.200, parentheses 2, transfers between individual appropriations within any one fund of the 25-26 biennial budget may be made during the fiscal biennium by order of the mayor. Provided, however, the transfers between individual appropriations with the general fund, fund number 001, may be made only within the functional classifications within the general fund identified in the summary in section 2 above. And so Jana did share what section 2 looked like, which is the ordinance table itself. She read the functional classifications. So those functional classifications are the administrative departments, police specifically for Snoqualmie, the Fire and Emergency Management Department, Parks and Street Maintenance, Community Development, and non-departmental.
I wonder if you could you give me an example of, just a hypothetical of how something like this might work?
So for example, if the Finance Department has a position that's been open for 6 months of the year, and so therefore we have some budgetary salary savings and so on, that we may want to transfer to another department, such as Fire and Emergency Management. We can't do so unless we come back to this council asking for a budget amendment to transfer that appropriation to that department.
It does requires a 2/3 vote, it's a supermajority.
It does, so any sort of,
Yeah, is there a limit on that? So if is it the $50,000 and over that requires our approval, or is it dollar one?
any dollar.
Yeah, no limit on it, any dollar.
It's any dollar. If it's $1 that we want to transfer between the departments, then we have to come back to council.
And it's important.
It's an ordinance, so it requires 2 readings, and like the mayor said, it's a supermajority, so we would need 5 votes to support that.
Councilor Benson?
So in your example, finance has an open position for half a year, and the mayor has decided there's a need, say, in fire, and that money is transferred over to fire to maybe hire another employee or something along those lines.
Maybe there's more overtime than we expected, something along those lines.
And this would allow the mayor to do that without the council's approval.
No, we will require council approval. This
Okay.
requires us to come back to council for that approval.
Okay, great. That's what I thank you for. I didn't fully understand it. It's beautifully written. I'm not, but I didn't fully understand that. So thank you for taking the time to explain that. I did have another question on section 5.4. And I was wondering if there's a should in there that I'm wondering if it should be a must or if it must stay a should. But if we could look at what you had written there. You may know a joke or
So I think he's looking for section 5.4 of the financial management policy. Yeah.
That shouldn't have
it was
been
on your
so
slideshow
Mhm.
thing. They don't call it a slideshow, do they? It's
We'll accept the term.
that's it. So Drew, you have such a sonorous voice. Could you read the blue?
It says ongoing revenue should equal or exceed ongoing expenditures in both the proposed and adopted budgets. If a structural imbalance occurs, then a plan should be developed and implemented to bring the budget back into structural balance.
I was wondering if that second should be a must. It seems to me like it ought to be a must. But I'm interested in hearing everybody else's thoughts.
This is an approved financial management policy.
Yeah, so this
Already.
is extracted from the financial management policy, which we adopted in June, on June 10th of this year.
What is the function of keeping it a should?
Plan should be developed and implemented to bring the budget back into structural balance. Then plan must be developed and implemented to bring the budget back. I mean, I feel that those words are almost interchangeable to a degree.
I agree,
Uh-huh.
but they have different meanings, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to get to Bill Clinton territory.
I don't know if we are.
Okay.
Quite into that.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, there's a difference between if there's a structural imbalance that isn't that's knocking us off budget, then we do have to. I mean, we have to balance the budget, right? That's a requirement.
Well, so another word is shall, potentially.
Yeah, so first of all, I think that's a really good point. I think there's a difference between should and must and shall. I think shall is what we usually use. However, since I don't believe that this is something that we are currently amending unless I'm mistaken. So I think that this would be something that we could take up in F&A and then perhaps bring back something with the rest of council.
Well, when you do, shall would be fine with me. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I wanted to just go over one more time why it is that the shark fin continues to persist. I remember in the past it was ARPA and transportation fees, if I remember correctly, related to emergency services or something like that. But it does continue, and every time we see this chart.
In this case, the shark fin is due to those mill site permit fees. So they bump up and then they bump back down. I believe it was the council member who suggested that they could also bump back down. Councilmember Washington, maybe. Johnson, what was it, you? Amazing. Thank you. So yes, that's the reason for shark fin.
Is there an expected, or has our partner city indicated in a way that we can publicly anticipate when we would know the outcome of the contract of police services without going into executive session immediately? And the reason why I ask is it seems like that's the big unknown for me, is where will we land and how do we anticipate that? And I'll stop there. Good stuff.
While we're in negotiations, not sure where the negotiations are, but while we're in negotiations, this budget should represent our current offer with North Bend. We shouldn't deviate because we're kind of getting negotiations by budget. Let's not do that. We shouldn't deviate from that. Should be that. And the budget can be revised anytime during the biennial as we see cost shifts, revenue shifts, whatever, depending on any contract comes in different than what we thought. This opens this budget up for discussion and adjustment and amendment.
Thank you.
And that was one of the factors that I pointed out earlier in the presentation, that is not where it's one to the revenue contract, those utility rates coming up, and one other thing. So.
Well, I think the comments that we're having are not huge. They're, I think, you know, the sense that I get, at least the way I feel personally, maybe I should speak to that, is that this is a really well put together budget. And I think that your point about the public safety tax being passed at 66% shows that the people of this city take public safety very seriously. They care a lot about it. And I really appreciate the way this budget addresses our gaps in public safety, especially with the fire department, and help us to address those gaps in a really creative and smart conservative way. So I'm really happy with this document. It's my favorite one. So really well done, really well done.
Yeah, I echo a lot of those comments. I think that a big part of the intent of the budget is to catch up, keep up, and see where we have opportunities to get ahead. And I think we have all of those encapsulated in our budget. Some of the things that we may be trying to get ahead, maybe those are things that we need. Maybe they're things that would be great to have, but we don't need them yet. You know, as we make sure that we have our ducks in a row for some of these large issues, we have the fee study. Didn't see that on your list, but anyway, we've got the comprehensive fee study that's also a bit of an unknown. We get the services contract. It was on there. Okay, I just missed it then. But anyway, yeah. But point being that we've got some of those things we need to make sure are all set, and then you know, look at some of those other things that are a bit of a reach. And you know, find the funding's there, and we think that the need is great enough, then that'd be great to go for it. And this provides us with the opportunity to consider those things as they come.
Any other comments?
So Mayor and I have been involved in the Meadowbrook Farm preservation, and we've asked them for their budget, and we're just getting the numbers. And I guess this question goes to the mayor because you have privy of it. I presume that there's money in our existing budget to fund what the requests are, and that they're not extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
Well, out of the realm of what the rest of the budget is. I mean, you know, in size, it's probably fits within parks and.
I think we included your mayor. I think we did a little bit of the presentation.
Okay. Okay.
50,000 for that's the virtual basis. So that's only if they go out of. If they go, no, this is actually what we're affected. But they have to provide this. But I guess one thing that's not in here is we have a capital request. We'll have to
The neighborhood of what, 25,000 for capital expense. Okay.
This would be something to think.
Okay. Okay. Very well. Thank you.
Again, being the newest member of the council and this being my first budget process, I appreciate all the helpful information from my other council members and administration and finance department. The staff has done what I consider an incredible, amazing job in all the preparation, trying to think about things and think outside of the box, and in presenting this. And things that I've had to learn are that, like the capital improvement project is kind of a fluid document, and so because of things that are maybe outside of our scope or may change over the next 2 years. So, but I think that definitely the city has done their due diligence in presenting all the options, and it certainly makes me more comfortable about things, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
In regard to the minimum requirement, what page are these funds on?
Yeah. So basically, these funds are non-departmental. So in terms of a page number, basically, which you're gonna find this in, I would say page 35 is the non-departmental section. And then generally they would be listed within services, I believe.
That did the 1.5, $1.6 million?
Yes. It's not in totality, it's wrapped into that, so.
County Line would love, at some stage, a breakdown of the $3.1 million there.
There's a little bit of a breakdown in the financial forecast. We can put first with Timothy. It's separated into human services, court services, and then non-departmental.
And what page is that on?
It's the first appendices. I'm pulling it up. Up on the screen is the financial forecast. And then you can see these three lines make up non-departmental. Oh, no, not those ones. That's one for one. Down one with Heather. Okay, got you. Stuck on revenue. Okay, so we have our human services, things that we support in the community. We have our court services. We're paying things like prosecutor, thank you. And then the non-departmental is anything that wouldn't fall into those two. And I'm assuming that this would fall, that it would probably be non-departmental, but I'm pretty sure it's non-departmental. So it makes up part of that $177,000 during 2025.
Can you think about any other things that would be in that non-departmental line? Because if it's just Meadowbrook Farm, 46, yeah, we got it.
It's not.
I didn't mean to make you research right now.
All right, so there are things such as the Greater Seattle Partnership, Puget Sound Regional Council, Sound Cities Association, King County Cities Climate Collaborative, customer deposits that are refunded overall as well. Postage. King County Liquor Substance Abuse Services. The Snoqualmie Valley Watershed Forum. The Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. That's basically what I could come up with. And then including the Meadowbrook, as we talked about.
The difference in the ongoing revenues over under ongoing expenditures different between the version that I have here for A1 and the one we got up on screen. I assume that's just the solid waste fee.
Mm-hmm.
It added up to revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. I have no other proposals for change, however, there still are a couple of items in which I'm willing to say, go ahead, budget wide. And come time to vote though, I vote no. Okay, I don't know that I've heard enough justification on the Bush truck. I've heard some tertiary justification. I haven't heard tertiary justification that I can really talk to my constituents and say, this is why. And part of the reason, guys, is we had a ladder truck and we said, based on mutual aid and based on operating procedures, we don't need. I have a bush truck in which the need is currently being handled by mutual aid and operating procedures. So I don't understand how that transfers into a need. But I'm not motioning for anything in here. I just, when it comes time, we want to make action on it. Understand I've got a requirement for an in-depth conversation to get over that hump. Okay. Can't choose. I can't remember what was the other item.
Without responding directly, I'll direct my comments to the chair. But I do believe the brush truck with the $100,000 we've set aside is very prudent, especially given what sometimes I'm skeptical of in the climate change. However, we've seen communities like Maui where you've had situations with fires. We've seen it in places in Oregon and California, Northern California. My concern is the brush truck will get us into those places faster, and we're kind of unique. We can't wait 30 minutes for another vehicle to show up that's the right size to fit on the trails that are part of our green belt, and we've got 20 miles plus of green belt. And so I see it as a preventative measure for us here. It's not, to me, it's not the mutual aid of going out and helping others, which that's great if it comes up. But I think our need is here. And, you know, that's a small investment and one that the chief has pointed out where we can offset some of the cost of that piece of equipment. It gives us more flexibility and the response time will be faster. And, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, you never know when you might need it. And I think that there's enough reason for us to give the benefit of a doubt to the fire department who knows this stuff far better than we may totally understand. So anyway, that's my argument for the brush truck.
Yeah, I certainly hear a lot of those concerns with regard to, well, you can't wait forever. I think the same is true of our tall buildings in town. And that number is just increasing. So I am in a position where I'm kind of struggling to try to figure out how all those things relate to each other and how we can't justify one thing, but we can justify another, especially with the DA agreement that does have one of those things, but not the other. So, you know, I think that the way that I'm looking at the bush truck is it's kind of in that category of things that maybe that'd be a nice thing to have, but it's not one of those things that's extremely pressing. And I would hope that we would have some of the other ducks in a row first before we go after some of the other reach items. I think that's kind of in that category of, okay, well, we'll have a conversation. Let's make sure that we've got our comprehensive fee study down so that we're not in the whole $300,000, whatever the number is, and that we have our police contract in order, some of those things, because that $100,000 can all of a sudden go away very quickly if these other things end up putting us in the hole. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all your points are really good ones. I see I think one of the other arguments for the brush truck was the opportunity to help pay for it by renting it out to other fire departments. So I think there's creative ways to make that more affordable. But the larger point, I think, is the one that Mayor Pro Tem Holloway made, that because we pass this budget doesn't mean conversation is over. This is, you know, we're still going to be talking about these appropriations before we start passing out checks. So.
Yeah, and just to follow up to the ladder truck conversation, I mean, again, we put it in the CIP, the capital improvement plan. However, the other piece that goes with it, in order to have a ladder truck, you have to have a lot more personnel on the ground before you can really employ it. And secondly is, we're not going to be the ones benefiting the most from it. That's where it's going to go out for mutual aid to other departments. And right now, we're depending on other departments to help back us up. And we don't have that many buildings at this point where a ladder truck is going to be incredibly effective. The difference between spending $1.5 million for a ladder truck and $100,000 for a brush truck that's more tactical, I think is the right move right now. And as we have more buildings come online, then we can go back and take a look at the ladder truck. It's certainly not out of the realm, but I think for our size of jurisdiction and what we're trying to accomplish, being nimble and having that brush truck seems to make a lot of sense over having a ladder truck. And part of it too is because of the number of personnel that are needed to be at the fire. It's not going to be the first rig on the fire. And so I think we have to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I'll just add that, you know, conversations that I've had with some staff around the brush truck, you know, definitely there's some advantages of being more agile, but we've fought those kind of fires with our larger rigs. So the question for me is, if an axle breaks, or, you know, we have to go in and do a paint job, $1,000, $100,000 paint job on $1 million rig, what does that cost? So I would want to see, so I'm definitely open to continue the conversation, but I'd want to see data off of what's the general risk for finance.
Great points by everybody here, and I certainly appreciate Councilmember Watten's eloquence on stating the kind of germane and pertinent points about that, as far as differences between the ladder truck and the brush truck. And as far as the uses of the potential brush truck, you know, when you drive down I-90 and you see all those blackened videos in there, those are examples of when you know, certain times of the year that you can get that out, because you don't always, it's rare that you're going to have highway access to the brush fire. You're going to be off road somewhere and out of the boonies or on the trails, as was brought up too. So I think that all of those are great points. Looking ahead and seeing the urban wildland interface that we have growing, and becoming more of an issue with and the valley's expansion, it's definitely something we need to think ahead for too. So it's just a starting point, and definitely not any other comments? Maybe go.
The 2025-2026 biennial budget. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And it's unanimous. The budget is approved.
Of course, I always have any comments basically, and this is really the fun part of the job. Because I get to brag about this place, I think, overall. So we've got the departments around me right now. They know how irritating this budget process can be, right, overall. And while it's necessary, it can really take people away from their normal kind of day-to-day work that they do, which is to really solve problems that matter to their departments. And so just want to thank those departments around me. We did throw a lot at them, so not to mention really a transition to the new Tyler system. And really there's a lot of new faces right overall too that have had to experience the budget process overall. So I just want to thank them. They handled everything like champs and with a professionalism that you might not see anywhere else but here. And they really spent a lot of hard time answering our questions at a moment's notice as well. So they're taking control, they're taking ownership of this budget, and it's very much appreciated. To the administration who pushed for the integration of Munis into the budget process, when maybe there was some resistance, right, with the budget team, and he very well knows that. And so the administration spent a lot of time rigorously assessing each and every department's budget request, and they spent a lot of time also making sure that we kind of break down those budget walls, and that we kept those walls down, which has allowed us to really find some new solutions to some of the old problems that we've had overall. And they've also, most importantly, have made sure that we remain focused on your priorities, Council, as we develop the preliminary budget. So many thanks to the administration. To Council, we want to thank you for your patience in terms of listening to us. It's been a lot of presentations throughout the entire couple months here, and for digging into the details and asking some really good questions. So as part of the book, you'll have all your questions kind of back there for the most part with a question and answer log as well. And those have been really, really good questions. I can tell that this group has kind of grown, and hopefully you feel like you've grown through this process. Finances in a marriage, a business, or an organization are some of the most difficult conversations spouses, partners, and councils can have. And you really did handle it with grace, humor, but also a constructively skeptical spirit that will benefit the city for years to come. So I just want to thank you for that. And then lastly to Jana, for each and every phase you were there. You have been consistently kind and have possessed an impeccably peaceful, calm, and generous spirit to each and every one, in the midst of a lot of sacrifice and effort. And so I just want to thank you for putting your heart and soul into this product right here. this one right here, and you've really made a tremendous difference to this place. So anyway, thank you to you and thank you to everyone for your help and work in putting together this 25-26 biennial budget. Thank you.
So this budget covers the council priorities, goals, and objectives. And each department director and supervisors play a vital role in creating the budget. The budgets, consider staffing levels, future plans, and plan. And when the departments presented to council committees, the leadership talked about how this budget will bring improvements or make things better for our community, such as water conservation, cross-training employees, employee development and advancement, utilizing units that will bring city efficiency, IT improvement, easier access to information for our residents, improve financial systems like the budget that we just did, units only before it was extreme Excel spreadsheets, building trust through transparent communication, critical public safety enhancements, related items, and a capital plan that includes enhancements to your neighborhood buildings, such as the parks and city expansion. We're very proud of our leadership and a passion for the department. So thank you to the department leaders and supervisors that did a nice job. And then special thanks to Jana Walker, budget manager, and Ruby Tay, our director of finance, for providing comprehensive budget process, the many PowerPoints and presentations to our council, as well as your in-depth review and valuable contribution of your time and experience. This is probably the earliest also approved budget within my 8 years that I've seen. And your first time holiday, well, it's never been any earlier than the end of November. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, council, for your diligence in reviewing the budget and asking those questions and approving it. Comments or discussion? We have a letter that we can review, so we can adjourn. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Then by Councilor Long and second by Councilor Hutchinson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? You are adjourned. Thank you.
Washington and Washington.